I'm about to show you the single greatest lie ever told in a war. In 1943, this dead body washed up in Spain. Chained to his wrist was a briefcase with top-secret plans to invade Europe. The craziest part? The body was a fake. The plans were a fake. It was all an insane lie to trick Hitler himself, and it changed the entire course of World War II.
Okay, so by 1943, the Allies were finally starting to win. They had just kicked the Axis out of North Africa and were now staring at Europe. The obvious next step? Invade Sicily. It was the perfect target. Taking Sicily meant they could control the entire Mediterranean Sea for their ships and break the Axis grip on the area. There was just one massive problem. The Germans knew. They knew the Allies were coming for Sicily. Winston Churchill literally said, "Everyone but a bloody fool would know that it's Sicily." So the Germans turned the entire island into a giant fortress. I'm talking soldiers, tanks, planes, everything. A head-on attack would be a complete bloodbath, with Allied planners predicting tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of casualties. A failed invasion wouldn't just be a huge loss of life, it could set back the entire war by years. The Allies were trapped. They had to take Sicily, but they couldn't afford to pay that price. They needed a miracle. They had to somehow convince the German High Command to move their armies away from the one place the Allies were actually going. They needed to plant a fake idea. The stage was set for a challenge that couldn't be won with guns, but with the most unbelievable and clever plan you've ever heard.
So how do you trick an entire army? Well, years earlier, a guy in British intelligence wrote down a list of wild ideas to fool the enemy. This list was called the Trout Memo, and tucked away as idea number 28 was something completely insane. Drop a dead body with fake papers from a plane, make it look like an accident, and let the enemy find it. And get this, the guy who came up with that idea was Ian Fleming. Yes, the same guy who created James Bond. He got the idea from a detective novel. For years, everyone thought the idea was too theatrical, too risky, too unbelievable. I mean, where do you even get a body? But this was 1943. The Sicily invasion was coming, and with it an unthinkable number of deaths. Too crazy was exactly what they needed. That idea from the Trout Memo was back on the table. It wasn't a fantasy anymore. It was the potential solution to one of the biggest problems of the war. The plan was given a code name so boring it was genius: Operation Mincemeat. The objective? Create a fake person, give him a fake life, have him die at the perfect time, and fool the entire German war machine. You can have the most insane idea in the world, but you need the right people to pull it off. Operation Mincemeat was run by a super-secret group, and the two masterminds behind it all were these guys, Ewen Montagu and Charles Cholmondeley. Ewen Montagu was a brilliant intelligence officer and a top lawyer. His brain was perfect for picking apart the plan to make sure the lie was so perfect no one could find any holes in it. He knew he was basically building a court case, and the evidence had to be 100% convincing. His partner was Charles Cholmondeley, an RAF officer who was a master of practical planning. He and Montagu were the perfect team, working together to write a story that had to feel more real than reality itself. Working out of a secret basement with no windows, they began the incredible process of bringing a dead man to life. They weren't just forging a few papers. They had to invent an entire person with a name, a history, and a personality. They weren't just trying to fool some random soldier. They were aiming this lie directly at Hitler, a guy who was notoriously hard to fool. First problem, and this is a big one, they needed a body. And not just any body. The cause of death had to look like drowning from a plane crash with no other injuries. And most importantly, they had to get the body secretly, so no family could come looking for him and blow the entire plan.
Their grim search led them to this man, WWII. He was a 34-year-old homeless man from Wales with no family. He had tragically died in a London hospital after eating rat poison, likely because he was starving. This was grim, but it was also perfect. An autopsy back then wouldn't easily find the poison, and the fluid in his lungs would look exactly like he'd drowned. WWII, a man who was invisible in life, was about to become the linchpin of the entire Allied war effort. With total secrecy, they moved his body to cold storage. To protect the mission, Montagu and Cholmondeley never called him WWII again. He was now simply the man who never was. He was a blank page on which they would write a story to change the war.
Okay, they have the body. Now for the fun part. They had to build an entire fake identity so convincing it would fool German spies. They couldn't make him a perfect super spy. He had to be human and totally believable. They named him Captain, Acting Major, William Bill Martin, Royal Marines. The rank was carefully chosen, senior enough to be carrying secret letters, but not so famous that his death would be all over the news in Britain. Creating Major Martin was an act of pure genius. They gave him a whole backstory and a life contained in what they called pocket litter, all the random stuff a person would carry. We're talking a book of stamps, a silver cross, and a receipt for a new shirt. To make him seem a little sloppy and more real, they even gave him an overdraft notice from his bank. But the most brilliant part was his love story. Major Martin needed a fiancée. A secretary named Jean Leslie gave them a photo of herself to be his beloved Pam. Montagu and Cholmondeley then wrote passionate love letters between Bill and Pam, full of jokes and plans for the future. They even added a stern letter from his dad who didn't like the engagement, and a receipt for a diamond ring. They even included 2 ticket stubs from a recent date in London. These weren't just items, they were meant to make the Germans feel like they were reading a real man's private mail. And then, the bait. Inside the briefcase was a personal letter between 2 high-ranking British generals. It casually mentioned that the Allies were planning to attack Sicily, but that it was just a fake-out. The real targets the letter revealed were Greece and Sardinia. To make the lie even more believable, they used the real code name for the Sicily invasion, Husky, but tied it to the fake invasion of Greece. Every single detail was aged to look perfectly real. This lie had to be perfect. If you think this is the most insane plan you've ever heard, smash that like button and subscribe right now. You are not going to want to miss how they pulled this off. By mid-April 1943, Major William Martin was ready to go. He had a life, a love, and a briefcase full of world-changing lies. The final step was the most dangerous, delivering him. The body was dressed in a Royal Marines uniform, sealed in a steel canister packed with dry ice and labeled "Handle with Care, Optical Instruments." Then they hired a famous race car driver named St. John Hawk Horsfall to drive the canister through the night to a submarine base in Scotland. I'm not even kidding. Prime Minister Winston Churchill himself gave the final go. He loved this kind of crazy plan. On April 30th, 1943, in the middle of the night, the submarine HMS Seraph surfaced off the coast of Huelva, Spain. The location was perfect. Spain was neutral, but it was crawling with German spies. The crew gently slid Major Martin's body into the water. As the current pulled him to the shore, the submarine's commander read a Bible verse, and then the sub slipped away. The trap was set. All they could do now was wait.
A few hours later, a Spanish fisherman finds the body and brings it ashore. The discovery of a British officer with a briefcase chained to his wrist caused a huge scene, just like they hoped. The British played their part perfectly, frantically demanding the briefcase back unopened and stressing how top secret it was.
This, of course, just made the Germans even more desperate to see what was inside. And they fell for it completely. Just as planned, German spies got their hands on the documents. They carefully steamed open the envelopes, photographed everything, and painstakingly sealed them back up. The package was then returned to the British. In London, forensics confirmed the letters had been opened. They took the bait. But the real question was, did they believe it? The tension was insane. For days, they searched for any sign. Then, on May 14th, they got it. They intercepted a German message showing that the plans had been reported directly to Hitler. And Hitler, who was famously hard to fool, bought the entire story. He issued a direct order. The measures to be taken in Sardinia and the Peloponnese, Greece, take precedence over everything else. The lie had been swallowed, hook, line, and sinker. And the results were instant and absolutely massive. Hitler personally ordered an elite panzer division to move all the way from France to Greece to defend against an invasion that was never going to happen. He sent more tank divisions to the Balkans and doubled his number of soldiers in Sardinia. Fleets of torpedo boats and planes were moved from Sicily to Greece. He was dismantling the fortress of Sicily himself. On July 9, 1943, the Allies launched Operation Husky, the real invasion of Sicily. They were braced for a total bloodbath. Instead, they were met with surprisingly light resistance. The German and Italian defenders who should have been waiting for them were scattered and unprepared. Even as Allied soldiers were landing on the beaches, Hitler still thought it was all a distraction. For days, he refused to send major reinforcements because he was still expecting the main attack in Greece. The deception had worked better than anyone could have possibly imagined. Thanks to the man who never was, the Allies took Sicily in just over 5 weeks, with far fewer casualties than they had feared. The cost was still high, but it was a fraction of what it would have been without Operation Mincemeat. Taking Sicily was a gigantic turning point. It led directly to the collapse of Mussolini's government in Italy. It opened up the Mediterranean for the Allies and led to the invasion of mainland Italy, forcing Hitler to fight on another front. And because Hitler had moved troops to the Balkans, he had to call off a huge offensive against the Soviets at Kursk. This allowed the Red Army to grab an advantage on the Eastern Front that they would never lose. Now, Operation Mincemeat wasn't the only reason the Allies won in Sicily. Historians point out other factors, like Hitler already not trusting the Italian military. But there is no doubt that this deception was a game changer. It saved thousands of Allied lives, shortened the war, and became the gold standard for military deception. It proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a bomb, but a brilliantly told lie.
After the war, the guys who pulled this off went their separate ways. Ewan Montague wrote a book about it called The Man Who Never Was. Charles Cholmondeley disappeared back into the secret world of intelligence, and for over 50 years, the true identity of the man at the center of it all was one of the war's biggest secrets. It wasn't until 1996 that the British government finally confirmed the body was Glinder Michael. Today, you can visit his grave in a small cemetery in Huelva, Spain. For decades, the headstone had the name of the hero he played, William Martin. Today, an edition finally acknowledges the man whose anonymous death changed history. Glinder Michael, served as Major William Martin, R.M. It's a final, powerful footnote to one of the wildest and most incredible chapters of World War II, the story of a homeless man who, in death, became a hero who never lived and saved thousands of lives with the greatest lie ever told. What do you think? Operation Mincemeat was a masterpiece of deception, but they literally used a real person's body without their consent. Was it a justifiable act of war, or did it cross a moral line? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.